right? So welcome to the faithful folks on YouTube. And I'll hand you over to Brother Mark.
All right, good night, everyone. And we are continuing again through the book of James. I want to dive right into it because it's a topic that a lot of discussion could come from, and we have a lot of material to cover to do it justice and to look at it thoroughly. So the passage that we're looking at tonight is James chapter 5 and verses 1 through 6. This one is more of a warning and an admonition than a principle um, to model. And this passage, this paragraph, specifically deals with the rich. Now, if you'd remember earlier on when we dealt with the sin of partiality and the how we ought to love our neighbor as ourselves, um, James dealt with the idea of treating rich people a certain way and poor people another way. And he made the reference, and the rich people, the one who persecute you and oppress you and will try to bring you before the judges and all of that. And so it would seem as though, very similar to today's time, that there was some people in the society who would have gained riches through questionable means, and they were um, using their status and position to affect people in a negative way. All right. So James, I believe, is dealing with the people who have riches as their goal, as their target in life. And we're going to deal with that. So let's look at what he says. From verse 1 to 6, I'm reading from the English Standard Version. It says, "Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver are corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasure in the last days. Behold, the wages of the laborers who moved your fields, which you have kept back by fraud, are crying out against you. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on the earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the righteous person. He does not resist you." So as I said, the tone of this paragraph is a bit different from all the others in the book, really. And as I said, it's an admonition, it's a warning to those who seem to be trusting in riches. And because of their trust in riches, they would have sought to acquire riches in a way that was not ideal, in a way that was not mandated by God. Now, when we go back to the book of Proverbs, we have a lot of principles, we have a lot of um, concepts that guide how we ought to have a relationship with the wealth here on earth. And one of the major guiding principles I have found, and we'll turn to Proverbs chapter 23 and verse 4. Proverbs 23 and verse 4. It gives direction and perspective on how we ought to view riches and wealth on this 23 verse 4. All right, the English Standard Version says, "Do not toil to acquire wealth. Be discerning enough to desist." And I want anyone who has a different version to, if they will, to read. Let me get the King James. Anybody has a King James? Let me see a raise of hands. Let me get one volunteer to read this in the King James Version. I see Trevor looking like he wants to volunteer. And if anybody has any other version, you all can get that ready as well. Just to get a sense of what this passage is really saying.
Labor not to be rich. Cease from thine own wisdom.
Right, so that's the King James, right?
Yeah.
Labor not to be rich, cease from thine own wisdom. So when the ASB says, do not toil to acquire wealth, be discerning enough to desist. So here's the idea that is being portrayed.
Mark, just by the way, for those who are watching on the screen, that is the New Living Translation.
Right.
That you see in there.
So this one says, do not wear yourself out trying to get rich. Be wise enough to know when to quit. All right. So the idea that is coming out here is that the goal in life should not be to acquire riches. That should not be the aim of your existence. And we need to be very careful and draw that line very clearly in our minds and act accordingly. Because we may find that we understand Solomon himself said that money answers all things when it pertains to this physical earth. So that it is something that we need to acquire in order to live. But the aim should not be riches. The end goal should not be riches. So we shouldn't find ourselves saying, I want $1 million, or I want $1 billion, or I want to be a billionaire, I want to be worth this much. That should not be the goal. I'll tell you why, because what you really want is not really the figure. You really want what the figure can do. And then you need to ask yourself, if I had $1 million, if I had $1 billion, if my net worth was so much, what would I do with it? All right, and that would be the more important thing. Now, as I said, money is something that is necessary for us to function. But what we have to appreciate is that we have to be wise enough to understand the right way to use money. So this version that Travell gave us is that be wise enough to basically know when to quit, meaning there are some lines that you should not cross in your desire to acquire the finances that you need to go about your daily life. Now, Solomon also wrote in the book of Proverbs chapter 10 and verse 4 that riches is actually a byproduct of a quality. So if it's the byproduct of something, it should not be the goal. Proverbs chapter 10 verse 4, it would tell us, let me get that. I'm going to go through these concepts fairly quickly, but then we'll pause to discuss them after, because I want us to have them all in our minds before we discuss. Proverbs chapter 10 verse 4. It says, a slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. So Solomon is laying it out very in a very matter-of-fact way. If it is you are slack in your dealings, then you will suffer poverty in this life. If it is you don't want to go look for a job, if it is you don't want to, if you probably have a job, but you're given less than what is required to function effectively in the job, you may not have that job for long. You would not progress in that job, and you would find yourself barely getting by. On the flip side, if you are diligent, Solomon says the byproduct of that naturally is riches. So it's an interesting thing that on the one hand, Solomon is saying, don't labor to be rich. But if you are diligent, you will be rich. So he's saying in your setting of your priorities and your value system, what you should prioritize is the qualities that will give you what you need in this life. And he's saying diligence will naturally allow you to satisfy your needs and even be able to bless others. And then jumping out of Proverbs for a little bit, and we'll come back in a moment. Paul writes to Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 6 and from about verse 9. He advises Timothy what he should tell those among the brethren who are rich. What are they supposed to do with those riches? 1 Timothy chapter 6. Verse 9. Because it would be counterintuitive for the scripture to tell us don't work to be rich, but then tell us the hand of the diligent will be rich. So and not tell us what to do if it is we find ourselves where we have been diligent for a period of time and God has blessed us with a surplus, with excess. It would be strange for him not to give us direction on what we are to do if we are in that position. And from verse 9 of 1 Timothy chapter 6, Paul says, but those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge them into ruin. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. That's not the verse I was looking for. Give me one moment. I would have wrote down an incorrect passage. All right, we will get that one. All right, I will get back that one and get back to you all on that concept by the end of the night. All right, but basically what Paul was advising Timothy about those who have riches is that they should be rich in good works as well. All right. Now, when you find yourself in a state of excess, coming back to our text, James said that, and he's speaking specifically those who would have acquired riches through questionable means, that their riches are now like a poison to them, because he paints a picture where their silver is corroding, their silver and gold is corroded, which is an interesting statement to make, because generally one of the qualities of silver and gold is that they don't corrode. And he is saying that their clothes are moth-eaten and it basically begins to rot their flesh. And that picture that he's painting is, to me, very reminiscent of the Old Testament account of God supplying bread from heaven. The scripture tells us in Exodus chapter 16, and you could read it when you get time. God instructed the people of Israel when they were wandering in the wilderness, and they complained to Moses, Moses, we're hungry, what are we going to eat? God instructed Moses to tell the people, I'm going to send bread from heaven every single day. And I'm going to send it for 6 days of the week. On the 6th day, I'm going to give enough for the 7th day. And everyone is supposed to go out and they are supposed to gather their portion to survive for that day. All right. And something interesting happened. there was a difference in the ability to gather among the children of Israel, because some would have been more able-bodied than others. But what happened was those who gathered more, the scripture says they had no excess, and those who gathered less, they had no lack. So that meant that when everybody went out to gather, let's say the young, strong, able-bodied men and women went out and they gathered more than they needed. And the elderly and the little children, they could have gathered as much as they needed for themselves. What would have happened is they would have portioned out what they would have required for themselves. And then the excess they would give to those who did not gather enough. So then there was nothing left over for them to use for the next day, right? And then the scripture describes a scene where those who didn't follow the instruction, and the instruction was, don't gather for 2 days, except for the 6th day, right? Gather enough for the day that you're going to eat. When you go out in the morning, gather just enough for that, all right? And there were some who did not listen to that instruction, and they gathered more than they needed for that particular day. And what the scripture says is that the manna began to rot and it stank. Interestingly, on the 6th day, when they gathered enough for the 7th day, because no manna was coming on the 7th day, it didn't rot and it didn't stink. And that was the provision of God. And just a fun fact as I'm passing through, when Jesus taught his disciples to pray, and he says, give us this day our daily bread, that was direct reference to that scenario where God allowed the bread to come from heaven every single day. And they had to rely on God and go out every morning and collect exactly what they needed. Another thing that happened in that story, interestingly, is that some people still went out on the 7th day looking for manna, and of course there was none, because God instructed that there would be no manna coming on the 7th day, that they would have needed to gather enough for the 7th day on the 6th day. So what we have to appreciate is that God understands that we have physical needs. However, he has outlined ways for us to acquire the things that we desire and the things that we require. All right. So let me throw out a thought question for us. Does anybody know what makes gambling a sin? Any thoughts on that? What exactly makes gambling sinful?
Not trusting in God,
Not
depending on chance to provide.
Exactly. And for a long time, well, when I was younger, I believed that it was the nature of it being a game of chance. All right. But then I realized that randomness and chance was even used by God to make decisions in the form of casting lots and all of that. So it wasn't the act of engaging in a game of chance, but it was the fact that if it is you engage in gambling, you are desiring to acquire quick money, and you are desiring to acquire it in a way that God has not designed. So going back to where we left off last week, and we established that if you fail to do what you know is right, to you it's a sin. So if God says, by the sweat of your brow, that's how you're going to eat bread. And you say, well, God, I hear what you're saying, you know. That's sounding all right, but I find a quicker way to do this thing. I could just go and play a card or roll a dice or roll a roulette, and I will get through like that. That is putting ourselves in the position of God and saying, well, God, I'm going to do it this way because I find that this way is better. And that's what people do when they decide I'm going to acquire the things that I need in the ways that they devise instead of what God has prescribed. All right. Similarly, the accusations that are made that James is making about these people who are rich is that they would have stored up riches and they would have done it by withholding wages from their workers. They would have done so by committing fraud. And they would have basically mistreated others. And while they're doing that, they are living lavish lives. And they are being condemned for that, because it's not that we should not enjoy the things of this life, of this present age. Because if it is, we go back to the book of Ecclesiastes, the advice that is given to us is that what is left for man is to enjoy the fruit of his labor while he is here. And while he is doing that, he needs to acknowledge that his whole duty is to serve God and to keep his commandments. So the advice is, while you are in the flesh, while you are in this physical, on this physical earth, you should take some time to stop and enjoy the beauty of life and the finer things of life. If you stop to enjoy the sunset, sit down and actually chew your food and savor it. I was always accused growing up that I don't chew my food, I just eat and go, because I'm always in a rush. And my mother always had to tell me, boy, sit down and chew your food, savor the thing. And she was trying to emphasize that, you know, you don't have to be in a rush. You can sit down and enjoy life, right? Also, she was trying to help that digestion and all of that good stuff, being a mom. But in our appreciation of life, it should not be that we turn our focus solely to experiencing the pleasures of life to the point where we forget the whole point of this life that we live. All right. So one thing I want to also mention, we may look at the ways that the world is devising to get ahead. And a lot of the things that the world would advise us to do is in direct contradiction with the way that God has established for us to do things. And in this present time, entrepreneurship is very popular. And we have this term called grinding, where you have to work harder than everybody else. You have to get up earlier than everybody else. You have to go to bed later than everybody else, if it is you want to be successful. And there's a passage in Psalms, I can't remember where exactly it is right now. And basically the psalmist says, in vain they rise early and they go to bed late, eating the bread of anxious toil, because he gives to his beloved sleep. And that psalm was a sobering psalm to me when I read it and understood it, especially in a time in my life where you felt that pressure to to be successful and be a provider and all of that good stuff. And here it is, the word is telling you, this is the way you have to go if it is you want to be successful. And God is telling you, just be diligent, take your time, get a good night's rest, and he will take care of the rest, because he's giving you that comfort in your sleep, that peace in your sleep. If it is you just be diligent in what you're doing, God is going to take care of the rest. And let me share some other byproducts of diligence really quickly. In Proverbs chapter 12, Proverbs, Javel just found it for me. Remind me where that psalm is 1 something.
Brother Steve actually found this.
127.
Yeah, 127, verse 2.
127. Right, yeah.
Good to see Brother Steve.
Thanks. All right. So 2 more byproducts of diligence in Proverbs chapter 12 and verse 24. Well, one is there, and the other one is in chapter 13, verse 4. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 24. Here the scripture says, the hand of the diligent will rule, while the slothful will be put to forced labor. If it is you're looking for a promotion in your job, you're looking for elevation in your organization, here's God's prescription. Be diligent, and it will come. I know of brethren among us who I could point to and say, look, diligence paying off. There's a sister, I wouldn't call her name. She's younger than me, and I've observed her getting into a position in a banking institution in this fine country. And one of the things I've noticed about her, she's always early to work. I know that because she doesn't line late if she knows she has to go to work the next morning, and she works in town. So she has to get up very early. And she is, from discussions with her, she is always very particular about her work and ensuring that everything is done, that her responsibilities are covered, and that she is above scrutiny in everything that she does. And this young lady would have gotten a permanent position in the institution, and as well as that, recently gotten a promotion. And I just observed that example of diligence paying off all by itself. And it's just testimony of how God can allow his principles to work. And I appreciated being able to witness that with my own eyes. Some of you will be able to guess what I'm talking about. Another principle that I want to share with us in chapter 13, verse 4, not too far away. Chapter 13, verse 4. The soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing, while the soul of the diligent is richly supplied. So diligence will automatically get you riches. Diligence will automatically get you progression in your career. But diligence will also get you abundance. All right, you will have enough so that you can be in a position to supply those who are lacking. All right. So if it is you find yourself in a position where you find you don't have enough. First of all, let me back up a little bit. All right. There's the principle that we are taught as people of God, and I probably should have started with this, is that we have to give God's share first. All right, that principle goes back way back to the days of Moses, and even before that. We see that even in Cain and Abel. And the template that we see under the law of Moses is that 1/10 was due to God. So you had the 1/10 that was due to God. You also had the gleanings. So if it is you had a field, you were supposed to, and we dealt with that when we dealt with loving our neighbors ourselves, and in Leviticus chapter 17 or 19, one of them, that the instruction was given that in our budgeting, we actually supposed to set aside a portion for those who are less fortunate, right? And it didn't have to be a large portion, because the instruction was when the children of Israel would have gone to pick their crops and to reap their harvest, that they would have left the edges unpicked, and whatever fell to the ground, they would leave it on the ground. And that was designated for the stranger, the sojourner in the land, and the widows and the fatherless, all right? And we need to find creative ways to work that into our budgeting, that we set aside a portion for those who are less fortunate than us, all right? Now, with the rest of our income, we are now tasked to manage that in a way that pleases God. It's not that you give God 1/10 and you set aside for those who are less fortunate, and the rest is for you to do whatever you want. No, no, no. The rest is for you to use wisely for God's honor and His glory. So, some basic principles that I've learned over the years, not all of which I diligently follow, to be honest, but some principles that I've learned over the years is that if it is you have a figure for your living expenses every month, all right, it is wise to have at least 3 times that amount somewhere in a bank account, so that if it is, God forbid, you can't work, you lost your job, you have 3 months worth of expenses that you can survive on stress-free, all right? When you have that set aside, you get into the habit, even though you may have something that you want and you may have that money, you would tell yourself, I don't have money for that, because this money is set aside for something else, all right? And that discipline and that diligence would allow for us to have and have in excess, so that other than that what is put aside, we can have to bless others. I was taught a very valuable lesson by one of my brothers. One day I came to borrow money from him, and he said, let me check and see if I have it. And he made a stress, he called me back, he said, yeah, he have it, and he lent it to me. I paid him back when I said I would. And when I called him to tell him that, hey, I have the money for you, he said, hey, I forgot about that. I said, how you mean you forgot about it? He said, well, what I do, when it is, I told you I'm going to check to see if I have it. I check to see if all my expenses are covered, and if I could lend you this money and not have to think about it. And that's what he did. He lent me the money and he didn't think about it, to the point where he forgot. And it taught me a very valuable lesson in management of finances, that we are stewards of what we have been given. So sometimes we may think that we have to meet every need that comes our way, but we can't meet a need if our needs are not met first. We have to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. So first we have to figure out what is good for me. We have to figure out, how do I love myself? How do I take care of what I am responsible for? And then I could even teach that to others so that they will have the same principles to be able to be in a position to help someone else. All right. Let me pause here and ask before I move on, and we're going to hear what Jesus says on the matter in a moment. If we have any comments, any questions, any additions to what is being said. All right.
Mark.
Yeah.
One of my favorite scripture is, I can't quote verse and chapter and verse, but if you give to the poor, you lend to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say, God is not bad pay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we may read the scripture literally, if you give to the poor, you lend to the Lord. But I'm sure if we research it, we will find probably a deeper meaning. But from my perspective, without that deep research, is given to, and I remember you as a child one day asking me for something, and I was probably hesitant, and you say, you quoted the scripture, give to him who asketh of thee and refuse not, or something to that effect. Right? But I remember it because it's not only, the people close to you, you practice that. Once you are in the position, as you say with your brother, to give somebody who asks, you wouldn't leave, let us say, a child without the basic necessities and give to somebody else. As you say, you make sure that, your responsibilities are taken care of. But sometimes we are called to stretch ourselves so that God could show how much he takes care of us, so that if we are open-handed, we receive. And I think there's a scripture that says, open your hands to the poor as well. And I always say you cannot receive if you're tight-fisted. If you close your hands, you cannot receive. So God has to, God is serious about what he says. And we have to trust him to the point of proving his word. Mm-hmm. If we never do it, we will never see the blessings. We wouldn't be able to say, yes, I know that when God says, if you give to the poor, you lend to the Lord, I have seen, I've done it, and I've seen how God has given back to me, maybe not in finance, but in other taking care of your needs, your children's needs, all sorts of ways. But sometimes we only look for the financial rewards. So we give $10, we expect to get 100. Mm-hmm. But we don't see the other ways in which God blesses us.
True. Yeah. And that also, if it is we thinking like that, it exposes the desire for the actual finance is actually the desire for riches. What we should desire is the things that the riches can do. And in that, we need to ensure that we are setting our affections on things that are above. So if it is we desire finance, then it should be to fulfill the will of God in our lives. But if it is we find a way, or God allows a way for his will to be fulfilled in our lives without the middleman of money, then we would be satisfied with that. And I think that's the best way. I'm now thinking about it, that we can think about money. Money is the middleman. It's how things are accomplished. But if we could cut out the middleman and God is saying, I'm going to directly supply this need, we shouldn't have a problem with that, because if God is saying you didn't need the actual dollars in your hand, but the need is already being met, I guess we should just give thanks and rejoice about that. Yeah. So let's hear what Jesus has to say on the matter. Matthew chapter 6 and verse 24. Matthew chapter 6 and verse 24. He says, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. Now, a similar statement was made in the book of Luke. And I want us to turn there, Luke chapter 16, and from about verse 9 to 13. Luke chapter 16. 9 to 13. Right. Now, this is just after Jesus would have told the parable of the unjust steward. And that is a parable that needs some unpacking all on its own. But we'll take the lesson that he was trying to extract from the parable. From verse 9, it says, and I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth, so that when it fails, they may receive you into eternal dwellings. One who is faithful in very little is also faithful in much. One who is dishonest in very little is also dishonest in much. If you then have not been faithful in the unrighteous wealth, who will entrust to you the true riches? And if you have not been faithful in that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. I want us to appreciate something. If we fail to master our money, money will be our master. Let me say that again. If we fail to master money, money will be our master. So, if we don't learn the principles that God has given for us to manage our finances here on earth, we will find ourselves being slaves to money. We'll find ourselves in a position where we're always trying, and we feel like we're in an uphill battle to get enough to meet our needs. And you're living, the saying that we have is hand to mouth. Now, and here's the thing, you don't have to be rich to have a problem with money. There are people who don't have, but their mindset, their desire is on the riches. And also, just because you may be rich doesn't mean you have a problem with money. So when it is James was condemning the rich in this passage, you would notice when he describes this group of people that he's talking about, the ways in which they went about amassing their wealth. All right. What we have to appreciate, as I said, that money is the middleman. It is a tool that we use to, and should be used to bring about God's will in our lives. So when it is we do acquire money and we may have some excess, just like the children of Israel, when they gathered their daily bread, they would be seeking now who has gathered little and they have lack. They would be now looking to meet that need so that their wealth would not become a snare to them. Because it's easy to trust in the wealth that one amasses and to lose faith in God. And I believe the greatest example someone who balance that concept of having wealth but still trusting in God is the person of Job. And when you look at his example, even though he had many possessions, he understood fully where they came from. Brother Dula, saw your hand just now.
Yeah, I wanted to get your thoughts on Proverbs 38 and 9.
Proverbs 30,
Yeah.
verse 8 and 9.
Yeah.
30, right?
Yeah.
Verse 8 and 9. All right. Remove far from me falsehood and lying. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food that is needful for me, lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? Lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of my God. All right, so this proverb is this one was written by Agorite, right? It was of the oracle. And I found this an interesting concept. It's the concept of enough. And really and truly, that's what God promises. When we are encouraged to set aside and give to God in the book of Corinthians, I can't remember which letter it is. And God says that he is able to make all grace abound to you, that you in all sufficiency will have all things always. Sufficiency means God promises that you will have enough. So what the oracle is asking for here is that he wants that sweet spot where he has enough, where is not that he is in poverty and in want, nor that he has this great excess that could turn into a snare. So he's saying, give me that sweet spot. And I think that is where we should be aiming for as Christians. Because all right, think about it this way. If we have enough for our survival and our living, all right, we understand that we are not here to stay. So with the surplus, we should just be thinking, okay, how can I best use this? Because I don't need it. I already have what I need. I am content. And I believe that's what Paul prescribes to those who were trying to preach this prosperity gospel, saying that godliness is gain, meaning if it is you're godly, then you should be wealthy. And Paul had to tell Timothy, from such withdraw thyself, because godliness with contentment is great gain. And having food and raiment, you should be content. Meaning, if it is you know where your next meal is coming from, you have clothes on your back, you should be content. You should be satisfied. It's not that you are complacent, and that's a different thing. That's I believe what Solomon was talking about, he who deals with a slack hand. Complacency is you don't have some of the things you need, but you're not doing your due diligence so that you're not following God's prescription by the sweat of your brow you will eat bread. You're not following the principles he has given. So it's like in the day of the children of Israel. If it is God saying, manna is going to come down from heaven every day, all you have to do is go out and collect it. And somebody says, I'm not going. How they expect to get the manna? It's not that God going to drop it in the tent. They had to go out and they had to collect it. So that's the principle is do what you have been instructed and be satisfied when you have enough. Because if you're not satisfied with enough, then you're greedy, right? That just makes sense. So you have to be able to use your wisdom, and that's what Proverbs 23 and verse 4 was alluding to. Use your wisdom to discern when it is enough. And when it is you have enough, then you start to look outward. Okay, I am satisfied. My needs are satisfied. Who else can I help to satisfy their needs so that they could get to the point where their needs are satisfied and the cycle could continue? All right. I'm going to go back to the passage that I wasn't able to find before. And thanks, Brother Michael, for helping us out. It was later down in the chapter, 1 Timothy 6. It was verse 16 and 18. All right, 17 and 18, sorry. It says, as for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. They are to do good and to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold on that which is truly life. Right? So he's saying those who find themselves in a position where they do have more than they need. He's saying if they are rich in this present age, they should also be rich in good works, being ready to share, being generous. And by doing so, they are able now to shift their focus on the things that are above. So I think he could be dealing with the scenario of, okay, if it is somebody is baptized, they have newly entered the church, and they may have had a mindset before of riches being the goal, but now they have a focus shift whereby they understand that there's more to life than just the pleasures of this present world, that they have more to look forward to. So now their priority shifts, and their focus would be on blessing the lives of others so that they could be able to further the work of the church and the will of God for them and their lives, and understand why they have been placed in the position that they are placed in. So probably a good example would be in the early church, when the church started in Jerusalem. I think you'll find that in Acts chapter 4, where Barnabas would have, it's like he remembered, okay, I have some land somewhere over there. He went, he sold the land, he came back. And the scenario was that people came from all over for the Feast of Pentecost. And they were converted to Christianity, and they stayed. So they would have probably packed for the duration that they had planned to stay. But here it is, they found the truth, they obeyed the gospel, and now they're fellowshipping with their brethren, and they have needs because all their possessions is back home where they came from. So now they had this scenario where the new converts of the church, their daily needs needed to be met. And everyone now started to think, okay, what do I have that I can use to meet the needs of my brethren now? And it's interesting that the same phrase is used to describe that scenario in the early church, that there was none that had any need, and no one thought that anything that they had was their own, because it was the same scenario like in the wilderness, where those who gathered surplus had no excess, and those who gathered little had no lack, because they distributed among themselves as everyone had need. And if it is, we We want the warning that is given to the rich in James chapter 5 not to be to us. That's the mindset that we have to have. That nothing that we have here on earth belongs to us. That's the understanding that the members of the early church had. Nothing that I possess belongs to me. It is entrusted to me, and it's supposed to be used for the honor and glory of God. So if it is, I see a need, and it is within my power to meet that need, I should by all means use the resources that God has given me and supply the needs that are before me. And I think by doing so, we can serve God as our master and not be a servant of money. All right. So if it is, there's one thing you want to take away from the lesson this evening, learn to master your money before it masters you. Don't find yourself where you're in a position you're a slave to money, because the one you're serving is God. So you should be focusing on what God has called you to do, not what money is requiring you to do. Because if that's your thinking, if the thinking is just, how can I make money? How can I make money? The thinking should be, how can I please God? How can I please God? In pleasing God, indeed, it would you should develop habits that would make you a diligent person, and the riches would be a natural byproduct. That's what the scripture is teaching. So the focus should be on diligence, creating habits that would benefit us in the long run. And by doing so, we would have enough for ourselves. And when we have surplus, we will be looking outward to see, who can I bless? Who can I support? What needs can I meet in the brotherhood and even beyond? All right. So that's all for tonight. Do we have any closing comments or remarks, questions? Well, if you have a question, you'll have to deal with it next week. Yeah. But any closing comments? Brother Lawrence.
Hi, everyone. While I feel good to hear of these things, what the Bible would have prescribed, the Bible is telling us in local words, management, in all we do, micro and macro is what is needed for us where we deal with our lives. Because the basics in lives are food, clothing, and shelter. And we are living in times right now where we have a lot of people. We call them the working poor. Don't care what they do. Their monies cannot carry them through comfortably. And it's only because of their faith and their belief in God, see them through. I personally feel that there are times when I have to be careful with how I deal with my monies, and there are sometimes I just do without things and focus on the basics and the necessities of life, not what I want, what I need to have.
Yeah.
And we must understand that we are living in times where the times are tough. And well, I can't make mention of people who I feel rich, because most of the brethren I know, very few I could put them in a bracket and say, well, they well to do. Very few. The rest I know struggling on a day-to-day basis. And my belief and my hope is that they believe that God will see them through it in any form or fashion, because we have so many day-to-day things that we have to do to take care of our health, and this can take care of our family, and and the necessities of life that we got to run our families with. The monies are not always there at all. And we even have where we have to give out even benevolence to those who are less fortunate in these circumstances. So, you know, I see it again as micro and macro management, and a lot of patience, a lot of faith in God and what he can do for us. And I think with that hope and that desire to keep hoping and keep pressing on, we know material things, they are not for us. God has given them to us as a comfort. We know we're going to leave this earth. Naked we came and naked we'll go back. And the reality of the matter is we got to live. And we all try to live a comfortable spiritual life. This is how I see it, bro. That's my take.
Yeah. And just to highlight one of the things I mentioned, even the benevolence ministry is a structured form of fulfilling that example that we see in terms of trying to distribute so that everyone's needs are met. So I see that as a step in the right direction. It's trying to organize that effort so that we don't have those among us that are going without. Yeah. So it's more of that spirit that we need to foster so that we could all be on the same footing and to be able to function effectively while we're here on it. All right. All right. Thank you for your attention. I will turn you back over to Brother Trooper.
All right, thanks, Brother Mark.